The Watcher's Curse. Mark and Sarah Peterson had spent years searching for their dream home. It wasn't just about finding a house, it was about a fresh start, a new chapter in their lives. When they stumbled upon the colonial-style home on the quiet, tree-lined street in Westfield, New Jersey, they knew they had found something special. The house was beautiful, with white shutters, a sprawling front porch, and a spacious backyard where their children, Emily, 10, and Jacob, 7, could play. It had history, built in the early 1900s, but had been well maintained over the years. The moment they stepped inside, Mark was sold. "Look at this place," he had said excitedly. "It's perfect." Sarah agreed, at least, on the surface. But something about the house unsettled her. The air inside felt thick, as if it had been holding its breath for decades. The wooden floors creaked beneath their feet, the walls seemed unnaturally tall, and the windows, despite being large, let in less light than they should have. She convinced herself it was just nerves. After all, moving into a new place was always an adjustment. The first few days were spent unpacking, painting, and settling in. The kids ran from room to room, claiming their spaces, while Sarah arranged furniture and tried to make the house feel like home. But from the very first night, something felt off. Lying in bed, Sarah stared up at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the old house. Every time she closed her eyes, she had the overwhelming sense that someone was watching her. She turned to Mark, who was already fast asleep, then to the bedroom doorway, half expecting to see one of the kids standing there. Nothing. Sarah sighed and rolled over, telling herself it was just her imagination. The next morning, as she stepped outside to get the mail, she noticed something strange. Among the usual bills and advertisements was an envelope with no return address, no stamp. It was simply addressed to the Peterson family. Frowning, she opened it. The paper inside was thick, old-fashioned, almost like parchment. The handwriting was elegant and precise, written in deep black ink. The message was simple, yet deeply unsettling. "Welcome to your new home. I have watched over this house for generations. It is my duty to observe, to protect. I see all, I hear all. Do not change too much. Do not disturb what should remain as it is. I will be watching." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her first thought was that it was a prank. But something about the letter didn't sit right with her. Mark, when she showed it to him, just laughed. "It's just some weirdo messing with us," he said, tossing the letter onto the counter. "Maybe an old neighbor who thinks they still have a say in what happens here." "But how did it get in our mailbox?" Sarah asked. "There's no stamp. No postmark. They probably just dropped it off themselves. Look, I wouldn't worry about it. It's a joke, nothing more." Sarah forced a smile, trying to push away the unease curling in her stomach. But as the days passed, the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. It started small, doors left open when she was sure she had closed them, lights flickering for no reason, objects moving slightly from where she had placed them. At night, she would wake up suddenly, convinced that someone was standing at the foot of their bed. Then, a second letter arrived. This time, it was even more personal. "You are making changes. The house does not like change. You are not alone. I see you, Emily. I see you, Jacob. Be careful where you play." Sarah dropped the letter as if it had burned her fingers. Someone was watching them. Someone knew their children's names. Her heart pounded as she rushed inside, locking the door behind her. She wanted to believe this was some elaborate joke, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. The Watcher was real. And they were just getting started. Mark remained skeptical, brushing off the letters as a prank. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She became hyper-aware of her surroundings, noticing the small, unsettling details that seemed to grow worse each day. The way the security lights outside flickered at random, even though Mark had replaced the bulbs. The strange, rhythmic tapping sounds in the walls, always in the same sequence, 3 slow taps, followed by 2 quick ones. The way she would turn off her room's light, only to find it on again moments later. Then there was the feeling of being watched. Always. No matter where she was in the house, she could sense unseen eyes fixed on her. Sometimes, she would catch a glimpse of movement in her peripheral vision, a shadow that disappeared the moment she turned her head. One night, she awoke suddenly, her body ice cold. The bedroom felt wrong. The air was heavy, charged with something she couldn't explain. Mark was sound asleep beside her, but she could hear whispers. They were faint, almost like the wind through the walls, but distinct enough to form words. She knows now. She feels us. She hears us. Sarah sat up, her breath caught in her throat. She strained to listen, but the whispers had already faded. A cold sweat broke out on her skin as she turned toward the bedroom doorway, and froze. The door, which they always kept shut at night, was wide open. She stared into the darkness of the hallway, heart pounding. She could feel something standing just beyond the threshold, hidden in the shadows. And then, ever so softly, she heard it. 3 slow taps. 2 quick ones. Sarah didn't sleep the rest of the night. A second letter arrives. The next morning, as Sarah made coffee, she kept glancing toward the mailbox, dreading what she might find. Sure enough, when she finally forced herself to check, another envelope was waiting inside. It was identical to the first 2, no return address, no stamp. But this time, the message inside was much worse. I see you at night, wandering the halls. You look afraid. Do not be. The house knows you. It has accepted you, for now. But I am always watching. Sarah's stomach twisted. They had seen her. They had watched her in the night. She ran back inside and shoved the letter into Mark's hands. This time, he didn't laugh. Okay, he said, rubbing his face. This is getting weird. Maybe we should call the police. And say what? Sarah snapped. That someone's leaving creepy letters. They'll tell us it's a prank and move on. That won't stop whoever this is. Mark exhaled sharply, nodding. All right. Then I'm setting up cameras. If someone's sneaking onto our property, we'll catch them. He spent the entire afternoon installing security cameras at every entry point, front door, back door, and the driveway. He even placed motion sensors in the hallway. If they come back, we'll know, he said. But deep down, Sarah wasn't convinced that the cameras would make a difference. Because she was beginning to think that whoever, or whatever, was watching them wasn't outside. It was already inside. Emily's night terror. That night, Sarah tucked Emily and Jacob into bed, trying her best to act normal. Mommy, Emily whispered as Sarah pulled the blankets up to her chin. Is the man in the walls real? Sarah's blood ran cold. What? She asked carefully. What man, sweetheart? Emily frowned, as if she didn't understand why her mother was asking. The man in the walls, she repeated. I hear him at night. He talks to me. He says he watches us. Sarah struggled to keep her voice calm. Emily, what does he say to you? Emily hesitated before whispering, he says we can never leave. Sarah barely slept. The entire night, she kept an ear out for whispers, taps, or footsteps. But the house remained eerily silent. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., a loud crash shattered the stillness. Sarah bolted upright as the sound of running feet echoed down the hallway. She leapt out of bed and threw the door open. Emily was standing in the hallway, eyes wide open, staring at the wall. Emily. Sarah ran to her, shaking her shoulders gently. Sweetheart, what's wrong? What are you doing? Emily didn't respond. She was motionless, her gaze locked onto something unseen. And then, without looking at her mother, she whispered. "He's in the walls. Nowhere to run." The next morning, Mark checked the security footage. Nothing. Not a single figure. No movement. No sign of an intruder. But the cameras had picked up something else. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the motion sensors in the hallway had gone off. The footage showed Emily walking out of her bedroom, standing in the hallway, but she wasn't alone. A shadowy figure stood just behind her. Not a person, something tall and thin, its limbs elongated and unnatural. It was watching her. And then, as Sarah rushed into the frame, the figure vanished into the wall. Mark stared at the screen, his face pale. "What the hell is that?" Sarah whispered the only answer that felt right. "The Watcher." Mark was no longer in denial. After watching the security footage, seeing the shadowy figure standing behind Emily, watching her, he knew they were in serious trouble. "We need to get out of here," he said, pacing the kitchen the next morning. Sarah was silent, gripping a cup of coffee with shaking hands. "Sarah?" Mark pressed. "Did you hear me? We have to leave. Now." She lifted her eyes slowly, her face pale. "I don't think we can." Mark's stomach turned. "What do you mean?" Sarah hesitated, then whispered. "I think the house won't let us. The doors won't open." It started as something simple. That afternoon, as Sarah tried to step outside to get the mail, the front door refused to budge. At first, she thought it was stuck, but no matter how hard she pulled, it wouldn't move. "Mark," she called, her voice shaking. Mark ran over and grabbed the handle. He twisted, pulled, nothing. It was as if the door was part of the wall. He yanked harder, but the wood didn't so much as creak. Frowning, he hurried to the back door, same thing. All the windows sealed shut. The garage door jammed. The house had locked them in. The whispering walls. That night, Mark sat in the living room with his laptop, searching for anything, any history about the house, any past owners who had experienced similar things. Sarah, on the other hand, couldn't sit still. Something was wrong with the house. She could feel it. Every time she passed by a wall, she had the distinct feeling that something was inside. Watching. Listening. Waiting. She pressed her ear against the wall of the upstairs hallway. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, scratch, scratch, scratch. Sarah jerked back, her breath caught in her throat. The sound came from inside the wall. She stepped away slowly. Then, a voice whispered. "You can't leave." Sarah ran. Emily's friend. The next morning, Sarah found Emily sitting in her room, talking to the wall. "Sweetheart," she asked carefully. Emily didn't turn around. "I like him, Mommy," she said softly. Sarah's heart pounded. "Who?" Emily finally turned. Her face was blank. "The tall man," she said. "He lives in the walls. He says I belong to him now." Sarah backed out of the room, her entire body shaking. The house comes alive. That night, everything changed. At exactly 3:33 a.m., Sarah and Mark were jolted awake by a loud, deafening banging coming from inside the walls. The entire house shook as if something massive was trying to break free. Bang! 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 The sound traveled, moving from the hallway to the children's rooms. Then came the whispers. Thousands of overlapping voices, hissing, chanting, laughing. Sarah grabbed Mark's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "It's awake." The house was alive. The walls pulsed. The ceiling cracked. The floorboards groaned as if something was crawling underneath. Then, Emily started screaming. Sarah and Mark raced to their daughter's room. And froze. Emily was floating. She hovered in the air, her tiny body limp, as shadowy hands reached out from the walls, gripping her arms and legs. "No!" Sarah screamed, running forward. But the second she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her. Mark pounded on the door from the other side. "Sarah! Open it!" Sarah turned. The walls were moving. They breathed like living flesh, rippling as unseen things crawled beneath the surface. The whispers grew louder. Emily gasped, struggling, her eyes rolling back. "Let her go!" Sarah sobbed, grabbing her daughter's hand and pulling. The hands in the wall tightened their grip, then suddenly, they let go. Emily collapsed into Sarah's arms. And just like that, the whispers stopped. The house went silent. The door creaked open. Mark rushed in, grabbing them both. They ran. They didn't stop until they were downstairs, huddled together. Sarah held Emily close, her heart racing. "It let us go," she whispered. Mark swallowed. "No. It's not done yet." And deep in the walls, something laughed. Mark didn't sleep. After what had happened with Emily, after watching shadowy hands pull his daughter into the walls, he knew this wasn't just a haunting. This was a trap. Sarah sat in the corner of the living room, holding Emily tightly, rocking her gently. She hadn't said a word since the night before. The house was quiet now, but the silence was worse than the noise. It felt wrong. As if the house was waiting. Planning. Watching. The call that never happened. At sunrise, Mark grabbed his phone. "I'm calling for help." He dialed 911. The phone rang. And rang. And rang. Then, a voice answered. Not a dispatcher. Not a human voice. A deep, crackling whisper slithered through the phone speaker. "No one is coming." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "Who is this?" he demanded. The whisper laughed. Then, the call disconnected. Mark stared at the phone screen. The call history showed nothing. No outgoing call. No missed connection. As if the call had never happened. Mark's hands trembled. "We really are trapped," he whispered. "The house fights back." Mark decided to force their way out. He grabbed a hammer from the garage and swung it at the back door. Crack. The wood splintered. He hit it again. And again. Then, suddenly, the door repaired itself. The broken wood melted back together, smoothing over as if nothing had ever happened. Sarah gasped. "No," Mark whispered. "That's not possible." Desperate, he turned and swung at the window. The glass shattered. Then reassembled itself in front of his eyes. The jagged shards lifted off the floor and fused back into the frame, the cracked ceiling until the glass was perfect again. "Mark," Sarah whimpered, stepping backward. "The house won't let us go." Then, the walls exhaled. A long, slow breath. As if the house itself was alive. And it was hungry. Emily's warning. Emily suddenly sat up, her small hands clutching her mother's shirt. "Mommy, we have to hide." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Why, baby?" she whispered. Emily's wide eyes flickered toward the ceiling. "Because he's coming." Then, a thunderous boom echoed through the house. The lights flickered. The floor shook. And a deep, crawling voice whispered from inside the walls. "You cannot escape me." Mark grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her and Emily down the hallway. They had to find a place to hide. They had to stay ahead of whatever was coming. But the house shifted around them. The hallway seemed longer. The doors changed places. Rooms that had been there before no longer existed. The house was changing itself, trapping them inside its maze. The thing in the dark. They ran down the hallway, only to slam into a dead end. A solid wall. There had been a door here yesterday. Now, it was gone. Mark. Sarah sobbed. Then, the shadows moved. Something emerged from the darkness. Tall. Thin. Its limbs too long. Its eyes hollow pits of black. The thing from the walls. Mark pushed Sarah and Emily behind him. "Stay back," he shouted. The creature tilted its head. Then, it spoke. "You were chosen." Sarah's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The creature smiled, its jagged teeth stretching too wide. "The house needs you," it rasped. "You belong to it now." Then, the walls began to close in. The walls have hands. The drywall cracked open, revealing hands. Dozens. Hundreds. Reaching out. Grabbing. Pulling. Sarah screamed as fingers wrapped around her arms and legs, dragging her toward the wall. Mark punched and kicked, trying to pull her free. Emily cried, clutching her mother's leg. "Mommy, don't go." The hands tightened. Sarah felt herself sinking into the wall. The whispers grew deafening. Then, Emily reached up and touched the wall. The moment her little fingers pressed against the surface, everything stopped. The hands froze. The whispers died. The creature's head snapped toward Emily. And then, the walls screamed. Not just whispered. Not just breathed. Screamed. As if the house itself was in pain. Sarah fell forward onto the floor, gasping. Mark grabbed her, pulling her up. Emily stared at the wall, unfazed. "It doesn't want me to leave," she said softly. "But I don't belong to it." Then, the ceiling cracked open. And something started coming through. "It's not over yet." A grotesque, inhuman arm slithered down from the ceiling. A long, skeletal hand reached toward them. The shadows in the house thickened. Emily turned toward her parents. "We have to run. Now." Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed Emily, and together with Mark, they bolted. The walls howled as the house tried to stop them. Doors slammed shut. The floor cracked beneath their feet. But then, Mark saw it. A doorway that hadn't been there before. A way out. He grabbed Sarah's hand, dragging her forward. They burst through the door. And everything went black. Mark hit the ground hard. For a moment, he couldn't move. The air was thick, almost solid, like stepping through a barrier of wet, suffocating tar. His ears rang. His vision blurred. Then he heard it. The house was screaming. Not just the whispers. Not just the distant moans from inside the walls. A deep, guttural, inhuman wail that shook the entire foundation. Sarah groaned next to him, clutching Emily tightly. They had made it through the door, but they weren't safe yet. They were still inside. The house is changing. When Mark blinked his vision clear, his stomach dropped. The house was no longer the same. The hallway they had just run through was gone. The walls twisted and stretched, reshaping themselves into something impossible. A staircase spiraled upward into darkness. Doors hung in midair, opening to nothing. The floor beneath them breathed, shifting like the ribcage of a living thing. And then, a voice. "You think you can leave?" The creature from the walls stepped forward. But now, it was bigger. Taller. Its arms were too long. Its face stretched wide, a jagged grin splitting open like a second mouth. It didn't just crawl from the shadows now. It was the shadows. It filled the house with its presence, wrapping itself around every door, every wall, every flickering light. "You belong to me now." Sarah gripped Emily tighter, stepping back. "No," Mark growled. "We're leaving." The creature laughed. Then, the floor caved in, falling into the abyss. Mark grabbed Sarah and Emily, but it was too late. The floor opened beneath them, and they plummeted into darkness. Falling, falling, falling. The air howled past them. The screams of thousands of voices echoed in the void. Then, they hit the ground. Hard. Mark gasped for air, his lungs burning. Sarah groaned beside him. Emily didn't make a sound. Sarah sat up in a panic, shaking her daughter. "Emily. Baby, wake up." For a moment, nothing. Then, Emily's eyes snapped open. But they were wrong. They were black. "Emily is changing." Sarah screamed. Emily's pupils had vanished. Her entire eyes were swallowed in darkness. She stared up at Sarah with a blank expression. Then, she smiled. "He's inside me now, Mommy." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered. Emily tilted her head. "He said I belong to the house." Mark grabbed Emily's shoulders. "No, baby, fight it. You're stronger than him." Emily blinked. For a moment, her little face twisted in confusion. Then, she started to shake. She clutched her head. "It hurts, Daddy. It hurts." The walls around them pulsed. A deep rumbling laugh echoed through the darkness. "She is mine." The house tries to consume them. The shadows closed in. The air grew thick, suffocating. The walls rippled, covered in writhing black veins pulsing like living flesh. Hands emerged from the darkness, reaching for them. Emily screamed. "Mommy! Daddy! Help me!" Sarah sobbed, holding her tighter. "We won't let him take you, sweetheart." Mark's mind raced. Then he saw it. A door. It was far away, barely visible in the shifting shadows. A single wooden door standing alone in the darkness. A way out. "Sarah," he shouted. "We have to run." Sarah nodded, gripping Emily tightly. Then, they ran. The house screamed in fury. The floor cracked open behind them. The creature lunged. Its long, skeletal fingers scraped across the ground, dragging itself after them. Mark's heart pounded. The door was so close. The final escape. The door began to close. Mark pushed forward. Faster. The shadows swarmed around them. The hands grabbed at their legs. Emily shrieked as one clawed hand wrapped around her ankle. Sarah kicked it away. "Run!" Mark shouted. They leaped forward. And slammed through the door. The nightmare ends. Or does it? The second they crossed the threshold. Everything vanished. The screaming stopped. The air was normal again. The house was still. Mark gasped, sitting up. They were back in the living room. The walls were normal. The house looked exactly as it had when they moved in. As if nothing had ever happened. Mark turned to Sarah, his breathing heavy. "Did we?" Sarah held Emily close, tears streaming down her face. Emily blinked up at her mother. Her eyes were normal again. "Is it over?" she whispered. Mark looked around, his body still shaking. The house was silent. Then, he saw the front door. It was open. They could leave. Mark stood on weak legs and walked toward it. Sarah followed, carrying Emily. They stepped through the door, out into the bright morning light. Fresh air filled their lungs. Mark turned back to look at the house one last time. It was just a house. Nothing more. No movement. No whispers. No sign of the nightmare they had endured. Mark took a deep breath and looked at Sarah. "Let's never come back." She nodded. They turned away. And never looked back. Final scene, the house still watches. Long after they were gone, the house remained. It stood there, silent, waiting. Then, the front door creaked open. The air shuddered. And from inside the empty hallway, a whisper slithered through the air. "They'll be back." Then, the door slowly shut on its own. And the house waited. The vanishing room. The house stood at the edge of town, its silhouette broken and jagged against the night sky. No one had lived there for decades, yet the windows never collected dust, the front door never creaked, and the walls seemed to breathe with an unnatural stillness. Those who passed by claimed they heard faint whispers drifting from inside, murmurs of voices long forgotten, warning those who dared to listen. It was this legend that had drawn 5 people to its doorstep on a bitter autumn night. They weren't thrill-seekers or ghost hunters, they were investigators, realists who had spent years debunking myths and proving that every ghost story had a rational explanation. But this house was different. There was a room inside. A room that swallowed people whole. Nobody knew exactly which one, but the stories were consistent. People had entered and never come out. No screams, no signs of a struggle, just gone, as if the house had erased them from existence. But tonight, they would uncover the truth. The team arrives. James Calloway, the lead investigator, took a deep breath before pushing open the rusted gate. His team followed closely: Sarah, the historian, Mark, the cameraman, Olivia, the researcher, and Daniel, the skeptic. "Place is bigger than it looked in the photos," Mark muttered, adjusting his camera. "It's not the size that bothers me," Olivia whispered. "It's the quiet. No crickets, no wind. It's like the world stops at the property line." James ignored the eerie stillness and gestured toward the porch. "Let's move. The sooner we get inside, the sooner we figure out what's going on." The wooden steps groaned beneath their weight, the front door giving way with little resistance. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of old wood and something else, something damp, rotten, and almost sweet. The house was frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, faded floral wallpaper peeling at the edges, a grandfather clock standing motionless in the corner. No sign of vandalism, no signs of squatters. It was as if the house had been waiting for them. And then the whispers began. Faint at first, like a breeze slipping through cracks in the walls. But as they moved deeper inside, the whispers grew, overlapping in hushed tones, their words unintelligible but urgent. "James," Sarah hissed. "Do you hear that?" He nodded, pressing his hand against the wall. It was warm, as if something inside was alive. "Set up the cameras," he ordered. "We're not leaving until we find the source of this." The room calls. The house was 3 stories tall, with countless doors lining its hallways, each leading into darkened rooms filled with forgotten memories. But one door was different. At the end of the main corridor, half hidden in the shadows, stood a door that didn't belong. Unlike the others, this one was pristine, its wood unblemished, its handle polished as if frequently used. Daniel frowned. This door wasn't in the floor plan. The whispers swirled around them, growing frantic, pleading. Something inside the room wanted them to leave. And something else wanted them to stay. James reached out, his fingers barely brushing the doorknob when the entire house shuddered. The lights flickered. A deep groan vibrated through the walls, a sound like the house itself was breathing. Then, the door creaked open on its own. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of decay, of something long dead but never truly gone. The room beyond was pitch black, a void that seemed to stretch infinitely. Mark hesitated, lifting his camera. "James, we shouldn't go in there." But James had already stepped forward. Because inside that darkness, something was waiting. Something hungry. James stepped into the room first, his breath catching as the air inside wrapped around him like a cold, damp shroud. The darkness was suffocating, thicker than any natural shadow, swallowing even the light from Mark's camera. It was as if the room itself was absorbing illumination, drinking it in hungrily. The rest of the team hesitated at the threshold. "James, don't go too far," Sarah warned, her voice barely above a whisper. But James barely heard her. He was transfixed. The room was impossibly large, far bigger than the house should have allowed. The floor stretched endlessly beneath his feet, and the walls faded into an abyss. There was nothing, no furniture, no windows, just the void. Then the door slammed shut behind them. The sound was deafening, echoing through the darkness like a gunshot. Olivia screamed, whirling around to grab the handle, but there was none. "No, no, no," she gasped, pounding against the wood. Mark joined her, ramming his shoulder into the door. It was right here. The handle was just here. James spun back toward the room, his pulse thundering in his ears. Something was wrong. The space around them was shifting, moving like the slow breathing of some unseen creature. And then, the whispers started again. "The room breathes." They came from every direction, rising and falling in an unnatural rhythm, circling them like a storm. But this time, they weren't just gibberish. They were names. James stiffened. "Did you hear that?" The others nodded, their faces pale, eyes darting around wildly. The whispers were repeating their names. Over and over, voices overlapping, some pleading, some mocking. Some sounded eerily familiar, like distorted versions of their own voices, warped as if spoken by something that didn't understand how mouths were supposed to work. Then the floor shifted. Not a tremor, not a simple movement, it warped. James felt himself sink an inch, as if stepping into something softer than solid ground. He lifted his foot, but the floor pulled. His flashlight flickered, the beam cutting through the dark just long enough to reveal hands. Hundreds of them, pale and lifeless, rising from the floor. Fingers gnarled, nails jagged, twisting as they reached for the group. They didn't just emerge from the floor. They were the floor. Sarah shrieked as a cold, skeletal hand wrapped around her ankle. She stumbled, kicking frantically, but the grip tightened, pulling her downward. James lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. "Hold on." The hands multiplied, appearing from every angle. Mark swung his camera, smashing them apart, but more rose in their place, reaching, grasping. A sickening sound filled the air, a wet, dragging noise, like something slithering just beneath the surface. And then, from the center of the room, something else emerged. The things that came before. A face. Mouth too wide, eyes hollow, its skin stretched as if stitched together from different people. It smiled. It rose slowly, its head tilting in unnatural jerks, its grin widening as it locked its gaze on Olivia. The thing spoke, but its voice came from everywhere at once, layered with dozens of different tones. "You shouldn't be here." The hands gripping Olivia tightened, dragging her downward. She gasped, her scream choked off as the darkness swallowed her up to the waist. "No. No. Get her out." Sarah screamed. James and Mark grabbed Olivia's arms, pulling with all their strength. The floor resisted. It didn't want to let go. Then the thing laughed. Not a human sound. A deep, vibrating noise that crawled into their bones. It raised one long, skeletal finger and pointed, not at Olivia, but at Daniel. "No," Daniel whispered, taking a step back. "No, no." The floor beneath him split open. He vanished. One moment, he was there, struggling, then he was gone, yanked into the abyss without a sound. The floor sealed shut as if he had never existed. Silence. Then, a knock on the door. James spun, his heart hammering. The door that had disappeared was back. And on the other side, someone was knocking. "Daniel?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. A second knock. Then a third. Then, the door burst open. Something stepped through. Something wearing Daniel's face. The thing that looked like Daniel stepped into the room, its movements too smooth, too perfect, like a marionette controlled by invisible strings. Its skin was pale, waxy, stretched too tightly over its bones. The eyes. They were empty. Sarah clutched James's arm, her nails digging into his skin. That's not him. James didn't need to be told. Daniel's face was there, but everything else was wrong. His posture was too still, his chest didn't rise or fall. When he moved, his arms swayed unnaturally, like they weren't fully attached. And his mouth. His mouth was too wide. He smiled, revealing rows of teeth. Not human teeth, jagged, misaligned, yellowed and too many. His lips barely moved when he spoke, his voice layered, as if several people were speaking at once. "You brought me back," it whispered. The room shuddered. The walls groaned, the floor rippled beneath their feet like a living thing. The shadows pulsed, deepening into something thicker than darkness. Mark lifted his camera with trembling hands, pointing it at the thing. His breath hitched. "Guys. I don't think it has a shadow." James's blood ran cold. The thing took a step forward. The lights flickered violently. Sarah gasped, her grip on James tightening. "What do we do?" The thing tilted its head at her. Too fast. Too sharp. "You can't leave," it said softly. "You let me in. Now you're mine." Then it lunged. The run that led nowhere. James shoved Sarah backward just as the thing's arm stretched, its fingers elongating into grotesque claws. It swiped, missing Sarah by inches, its nails carving deep gashes into the wooden floor. "Run!" James bellowed. They turned and sprinted toward the door, but the moment they reached it, the room changed. The door was gone. Sarah slammed into the wall where it had been, gasping in horror. "No, no, no." Mark grabbed her shoulders. "It's a trick. It has to be a trick." The whispers began again, crawling up their spines like cold fingers. The walls shifted, warping like melting wax. The ceiling stretched upward, disappearing into an abyss of darkness. The room was expanding. But the thing was still right behind them. It crawled now, moving on all fours, its limbs bending in ways that defied nature. Its neck twisted, its head snapping from side to side as it watched them with those hollow eyes. Then, it opened its mouth wider. A terrible, choking noise filled the air, a guttural, rasping breath that wasn't coming from its throat. It was coming from everywhere. James grabbed Mark's camera, flipping it toward the thing. The screen flickered, and for a split second, he saw Daniel. The real one. Buried inside. His face, frozen in a silent scream, pressed beneath the thing's stretched skin. His mouth moved, mouthing words James couldn't hear. But James knew what he was saying. "Help me." The mirror in the dark. James turned away. He grabbed Sarah and Mark, shoving them toward the farthest wall. "We need to find another way." "There isn't one." Olivia sobbed. "We're trapped." But then, the shadows twitched. A shape formed in the wall. A rectangle. James's breath caught. A mirror. It was massive, stretching from floor to ceiling, its surface rippling like water. But it didn't reflect them. It reflected, somewhere else. A hallway. And at the end of the hallway, a door. Mark grabbed James's arm. Are we really going to? We have no choice, James hissed. The thing howled. It was closer. Too close. Its arms stretched toward them, its skin splitting at the seams, revealing glimpses of the writhing, shifting things inside. James didn't hesitate. He jumped through the mirror. And the others followed. James didn't know if he was falling or being pulled. The mirror's surface wasn't glass. It was something else, something alive. It wrapped around him, squeezing like a cold, wet throat. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then he hit the floor. Hard. Gasping, James rolled onto his hands and knees. The air smelled wrong, a thick, metallic stench that made his stomach twist. Then he saw the others. Sarah, Olivia, and Mark lay sprawled around him, coughing, disoriented. But there was no sign of the thing. For a moment, relief flickered in James's chest. Then he looked around. They were still inside the house. But it was different. The walls were taller, stretching upward into endless darkness. The floor was no longer wood but cold stone, slick with some unidentifiable liquid. And the air. The air hummed, a low, throbbing vibration that made James's bones ache. Mark stumbled to his feet, clutching his camera like a lifeline. He panned it around, his breath coming in short gasps. Where the hell are we? James swallowed hard. I don't think we ever left. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Then where's the mirror? James turned. It was gone. The path of no return. The only thing in front of them was a hallway. A long, narrow corridor stretching into infinite darkness, lined with mirrors. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Each one distorted, warped. Some reflected the hallway, but others showed things that shouldn't exist. One mirror reflected them standing in the corridor, but their faces were missing. Another showed Daniel, trapped behind the glass, his mouth open in a soundless scream. His hands pressed against the surface, bloody and desperate. Sarah whimpered. I don't want to go in there. James exhaled sharply. Do we have a choice? Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. Something's watching us. James turned slowly. At first, he saw nothing. Then, the mirrors shifted. Their reflections moved. But they hadn't moved. James's stomach dropped. One of the reflections, his own, tilted its head at an unnatural angle. It was smiling. A wide, stretched, unnatural grin. Then it took a step forward. But James hadn't moved. He took an instinctive step back. And the reflection stepped out of the mirror. The thing in the glass. It wasn't just his reflection. All of their reflections were stepping out. Distorted, twisted versions of them. Their eyes were hollow, their faces stretched, their limbs too long. Mark's double twitched violently, his bones cracking as he turned his head too far to the side. Sarah's doppelganger grinned too widely, her lips peeling back to reveal gums and nothing else. Olivia's reflection crawled instead of walking, its arms bending the wrong way, its nails scraping the floor. And James's double. James's double had no eyes. Only empty, gaping holes. The air shook with whispers. You shouldn't have come here. You opened the door. Now you belong to us. James's heart pounded. Run. They bolted down the hallway, the whispers swelling into a deafening cacophony. The reflections pursued them, their footsteps not matching their own. James could hear his own double laughing. Sarah shrieked as her doppelganger lunged at her, fingers stretching into clawed hands. James grabbed her, yanking her forward just as the thing missed by inches. Mark gasped. The door. James looked ahead. A massive door loomed at the end of the hallway, impossibly tall, covered in scratches and handprints. But something was standing in front of it. Not a reflection. Not a shadow. Something worse. The thing that waits beyond the door. It was tall, inhumanly tall. Its head brushed the ceiling, its body wrapped in something that looked like skin. It had no face, just a smooth, blank expanse of flesh where its features should have been. But its arms were too many. They hung from its body, twitching, reaching, clawing at the air. Some were human. Some weren't. And then it spoke. Not with words. With every voice they had ever known. Their parents. Their friends. Their own voices. You should have never opened the door. James froze. He couldn't move. Couldn't think. And then the thing reached for him. Its fingers brushed his face. And James saw a vision, burning into his mind. The truth. The house wasn't haunted. It wasn't cursed. It was a trap. A place that didn't just consume people, it replaced them. The things in the mirrors. The thing that wore Daniel's face. They weren't ghosts. They were the people who had come before. Trapped. Twisted. Changed into something else. And now it was their turn. James couldn't breathe. The creature's fingers weren't fingers at all, they were veins, tendons, and writhing nerves, burrowing under his skin, pulling something from him. His mind felt unraveling, as if his thoughts, memories, and very identity were being peeled away like layers of old wallpaper. The visions continued to burn through his skull. People, thousands of them, trapped behind glass. Their mouths open in eternal screams, yet no sound came out. Their eyes, hollowed out, empty voids. Their reflections, twisted monstrosities, crawling through the mirrors, wearing their faces like masks. And then James saw himself. Or at least, what he would become. A hollowed-out husk, standing in front of a mirror, its head twitching, jaw unhinging like a snake's. The thing that wore his skin turned, its eyeless sockets burning into him. It smiled. "Run, James." The voice came from somewhere far away. Sarah? Mark? Olivia? He couldn't tell anymore. He barely knew his own name. But then, he felt pain. His hand burned. James looked down. Sarah had grabbed his wrist, pressing something sharp against his palm, a shard of glass. The pain cut through the fog in his brain. The creature screamed, its many arms recoiling. And suddenly, James could move again. The door that should never open. "James, run." Sarah's voice snapped him back to reality. The thing lurched forward, its arms reaching again, stretching. The air hummed violently, the sound of 1,000 voices speaking at once. James turned and bolted. Mark and Olivia were already slamming into the door at the end of the hall, their hands clawing at the rusted handle. But the door wouldn't budge. Mark let out a strangled cry. "It won't open." James looked back. The reflections were catching up. Their twisted doppelgangers were racing down the hall, their limbs too long, their movements jerky, their expressions frozen in a grotesque, unnatural grin. The thing behind them was getting closer. James's heart pounded. The door was their only chance. "Move," he shouted, rushing forward. Mark and Olivia staggered back as James slammed his entire weight against the door. It didn't budge. But the mirror next to it cracked. James's eyes widened. The mirrors. The mirrors were the key. He turned, searching the walls, and saw it. A single mirror that wasn't like the others. It wasn't warped. It wasn't distorted. It showed the real world. The hallway they had entered from. The room before the nightmare began. And the door on the other side was open, breaking the glass. James didn't hesitate. He grabbed the shard of glass from his hand and hurled it at the mirror. It shattered. And suddenly, the room collapsed. The mirrors along the walls shook violently, splintering. The air ripped apart, a deafening roar filling the corridor. The reflections screamed in unison, their mouths opening too wide, revealing rows of teeth that weren't human. The creature behind them let out a shriek, its many arms convulsing, its form glitching, as if it was struggling to hold its shape. James grabbed Sarah's hand. "Go." They raced toward the broken mirror. Mark jumped first, vanishing through the shattered glass. Olivia followed, her body flickering as she passed through. Sarah hesitated for only a second, then dived after them. James turned back just as the thing reached for him. Its fingers brushed his face. And James saw everything. 1,000 lifetimes. 1,000 souls. All trapped. All screaming. And then he jumped. The escape that wasn't. James hit the ground hard. The air felt normal. No humming. No whispers. Just the faint creaking of an old house settling. He gasped, rolling onto his side. Mark was sprawled across the floor, his chest heaving. Olivia was on her knees, staring at the broken mirror in silent horror. Sarah stood beside them, her face pale, her hands trembling. They had made it. They were back. James let out a shaky laugh. We did it." Sarah turned to him. Her face was ashen. "No," she whispered. James frowned. "What do you mean, no?" Sarah slowly raised a hand. James followed her gaze. And his heart stopped. The mirror wasn't broken. It was whole. And inside the glass, their reflections hadn't moved. They were still standing in the hallway on the other side. Watching them. Smiling. And then James's reflection tilted its head. It grinned. And walked away. The final horror. A cold, suffocating dread wrapped around James's lungs. They had escaped. But not really. Because the things in the mirrors had taken their place. Sarah backed away from the mirror, shaking. "James, what if we're not really?" The house creaked loudly. The walls shifted. Mark let out a sharp gasp. The door. James turned. And felt his stomach drop. The door they had come through was gone. The room was changing. The walls were stretching. The light outside dimmed, turning that same unnatural, inky black. James's chest tightened. They hadn't escaped. They had just stepped into another layer. A different part of the trap. And somewhere, in another mirror, their real selves were watching. And smiling. They would never leave. Darkness knows your name. The first time he heard it, he thought it was a dream. Ethan sat up in bed, his pulse hammering against his ribs. His room was silent except for the faint hum of his ceiling fan, the digital glow of his alarm clock casting an eerie red light across the walls. 3:07 a.m. He swallowed, trying to shake the lingering feeling that someone had spoken. It was impossible, he lived alone, and his apartment was locked. Maybe the voice had been part of a dream he couldn't remember. But it hadn't felt like a dream. It had been a whisper. Right next to his ear. And it had said his name. A slow chill crept down his spine. He exhaled shakily and turned on his bedside lamp, the yellow glow pushing the shadows back. He grabbed his phone and checked the time again. Still 3:07 a.m. He was being paranoid. Sighing, he rubbed his temples and forced himself to lie back down. The room was too quiet, as if the world outside had stopped moving. He turned onto his side, pulling the blanket up to his chin. He didn't hear anything else that night. But somehow, he felt watched. The next night, he woke up again. 3:07 a.m. And this time, he knew he hadn't imagined it. The whisper came again, soft, breathy, and too close. Ethan. His whole body stiffened. His breath hitched in his throat. The voice had come from the empty side of his bed. Slowly, with every muscle tense, he turned his head toward the sound. Nothing. Just darkness. But the feeling of something unseen lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. His fingers gripped the blanket so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He reached for his phone with his other hand, shaking as he turned on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing. No one. His apartment door was still locked. The windows were shut. No one was there. Yet, as he sat in bed, struggling to control his ragged breathing, the air around him felt wrong. Heavy. Pressing in on him. Like someone was still watching. By the third night, he was afraid to sleep. He stayed up, scrolling mindlessly through his phone, trying to drown out his nerves with background noise. His apartment was small, just a one-bedroom unit with a tiny kitchen and a single bathroom. Nowhere for anyone to hide. But it didn't matter. The whisper would come anyway. And at exactly 3:07 a.m., it did. Ethan. This time, it sounded different. Closer. His skin prickled with goosebumps. His breath hitched. He didn't want to look. But something inside him forced him to. He turned his head slowly toward the voice. And in the dim glow of his bedside clock, he saw it. A shape. A tall, thin figure standing in the farthest corner of his room. Motionless. Watching. Waiting. Ethan's breath stopped in his throat. His heart pounded so violently he thought it would burst. The figure was barely visible in the darkness, but its outline was wrong. Unnatural. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. But it was there. Watching. Waiting. Ethan fumbled for the lamp switch, his fingers shaking so badly he nearly knocked it over. The light clicked on. And the corner was empty. But something had changed. The air felt colder. Thicker. And then, just as his heart started to slow, the whisper came again. Ethan. But this time, it was right behind him. Ethan didn't sleep after that night. The whisper still rang in his ears. That last time, it had come from directly behind him. He'd felt breath on his neck. Yet, when he'd turned around, he'd seen nothing. The air in his apartment felt wrong now, thick, oppressive, like it was pressing down on him. It was as if something unseen had settled into the space. Watching. Waiting. But the worst part? The figure in the corner. He'd seen it. He was sure of it. A shape standing in the darkness, tall and unnatural. But the moment he turned on the light, it had disappeared. Had he imagined it? No. Something was in his apartment. And it knew his name. The next day, Ethan tried to go about his routine like normal. He went to work. He avoided eye contact with his coworkers, feeling strangely disconnected from everything. Their voices sounded distant, like they were speaking from the other end of a tunnel. The hours dragged. When his shift ended, the thought of going home filled him with dread. But he had nowhere else to go. That night, he kept the lights on. He turned on the TV, let his phone play podcasts at full volume, and even left the closet door open, just to make sure nothing was inside. But none of it mattered. Because at exactly 3:07 a.m., he heard it again. Ethan. The whisper slithered through the room like a breath of cold air. Ethan froze. He kept his eyes locked on the TV, refusing to look. But then he saw it. Not in the corner this time. Not in the darkness. In the reflection of the TV screen. A tall, thin figure stood directly behind him. Its body was wrong, elongated limbs, a head tilted at an unnatural angle. And though its face was nothing but a dark void, he felt it staring. Ethan's stomach lurched. He couldn't breathe. His fingers trembled as he reached for the remote. Click. The TV screen went black. And in the glassy reflection, the figure was still there. Closer. Standing right behind his shoulder. Ethan lunged for the lamp, nearly knocking it over in his panic. The moment the light flickered on, the figure was gone. The apartment was silent again. But his skin crawled with the feeling that he was still not alone. He barely slept, keeping the lights on until dawn. The next night, Ethan made a decision. He covered every reflective surface in his apartment. The TV, unplugged and covered with a sheet. The bathroom mirror, draped with a towel. His phone, face down, shoved under a pile of clothes. No more reflections. No more glimpses of that thing. Maybe it would stop. Maybe. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't. At 3:07 a.m., the whisper came again. Ethan. This time, it was different. The whisper wasn't just a sound. It was a feeling. It crawled into his mind, wrapped around his thoughts like a hand clutching his skull. And then, something even worse happened. The whisper laughed. Not a normal laugh. A soft, breathy chuckle. Mocking. And then it spoke again. You can't hide. Ethan's stomach twisted. His pulse hammered in his ears. And then, a sound. A soft, dragging noise. Coming from the closet. No. No, no, no. His eyes locked on the door, his breath frozen in his lungs. It was open. Just an inch. But he had closed it before bed. He was sure he had. A long, slow creak filled the room as the door swung open another inch. Something was inside. Ethan's vision blurred with fear. His muscles screamed at him to move, to run. But he couldn't. He could only sit there, frozen, as the darkness inside the closet shifted. Something stepped forward. And in the dim light of his bedside lamp, he saw it. The shadow. It wasn't on the wall. It was standing in front of it. And this time, it didn't disappear. This time, it started walking toward him. Ethan didn't scream. His throat had locked up, his body paralyzed as the shadow stepped toward him from the closet. It had no face, no features, just an absence of light, a hole in reality itself. Yet he could feel it staring at him. His breath came in short, panicked bursts. His mind screamed at him to move, to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The figure took another step. The air in the room thickened, pressing against his chest, suffocating him. He wanted to reach for the lamp, to flood the room with light, but he couldn't look away. The shadow knew. It knew he was helpless. It was enjoying this. A low, distorted whisper slithered through the silence. You see me now. Ethan gasped. His body finally responded. With a choked cry, he lunged for the lamp and slammed the switch. Light exploded into the room. And the shadow was gone. But the closet door? Wide open. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Or the next. By the third night of no sleep, his body was shutting down. His skin felt too tight, his nerves constantly on edge. The world around him seemed off, colors too dull, sounds too distant. He hadn't gone to work. Hadn't left his apartment. The air inside felt tainted. Like the very walls were breathing. The whispering hadn't stopped. Ethan. You can't escape. You are mine. It spoke at random times now. Not just at 3:07 a.m. When he stood in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. Ethan. When he showered, the steam fogging up the mirror. Watching you. When he closed his eyes for even a second. Let me in. He couldn't take it anymore. That night, he made another decision. He left every light on. Bedroom. Kitchen. Bathroom. Even the hallway outside his apartment door. No more darkness. No more shadows. He sat in bed, phone in hand, forcing himself to stay awake. His body begged for sleep, but he knew what would happen if he closed his eyes. Hours passed. His vision blurred. His head felt too heavy for his neck. His phone slipped from his fingers. His body surrendered. His eyes shut. Darkness. And then. A cold hand clamped over his mouth. Ethan's eyes snapped open, his scream muffled by something ice-cold. A face loomed over him. But it wasn't human. It was a void. A gaping, swirling emptiness where a face should be. And it was right there. Inches from his own. A sound bubbled from its throat. Laughter. Not a whisper this time. A deep, wet, unnatural chuckle. Ethan thrashed, kicking, struggling against the impossible weight pressing him into the mattress. The shadow didn't move. It only leaned closer, its featureless face brushing against his ear. And it whispered something new. You are already asleep. Ethan's entire body seized. His lungs burned. His vision swam. He tried to scream, but the sound never left his throat. The shadow's hand pressed harder. And then. Darkness. He woke up gasping. The lights were still on. His room was empty. His sheets were soaked with sweat. A dream. It had to be a dream. But then, as he sat there, struggling to catch his breath, he saw it. His phone. It was lying face up on the nightstand. And the screen was on. Recording. With a trembling hand, Ethan picked it up and pressed play. The video started. It showed him. Asleep. Tossing, turning. And then. The closet door opened. His body turned to ice. The screen showed a tall, thin figure creeping out. Moving with unnatural slowness. It climbed onto the bed. And then, just before the recording ended, the figure turned to the camera. And smiled. The screen went black. And then. Ethan. The whisper came from inside the phone. And this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, layered beneath the voice, was the sound of something else. Breathing. Right next to him. Ethan dropped the phone. The whisper was still there, leaking from the speaker like a breath in his ear. Ethan. Then, a crackle of static. And beneath it, something else. Not just breathing this time. A low, guttural voice. Words spoken in a language he didn't understand. Twisted. Warped. Like a recording played in reverse. The phone buzzed violently. The screen flickered, the pixels distorting, stretching, as if something was inside the device. And then. The screen went black. The whispering stopped. The silence was worse. Ethan's hands shook as he picked up the phone. His heartbeat pounded in his skull. The recording was gone. As if it had never existed. But he knew what he saw. And worse, what he felt. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. That night, he refused to sleep. He kept every light on. Blasted the TV at full volume. Even played white noise on his laptop, hoping to drown out the whispers. But at exactly 3:07 a.m., the static came back. It poured from the TV speakers, the laptop, even his phone, a horrible, high-pitched shrieking, like radio interference mixed with distant screaming. Ethan clapped his hands over his ears, wincing. And then, the voices began. They spoke in layers. Hundreds of them. Soft, whispering, overlapping. Some too quiet to understand. Others louder. Some laughing. Others weeping. But one voice rose above the rest. A voice he recognized. Ethan. The shadow. His stomach turned. His body went cold. And then. The TV screen changed. For a second, just a flicker, he saw himself. Sitting on the bed. But he wasn't alone. A dark figure loomed behind him, its face mere inches from his own. Then, static. The power cut out. Darkness swallowed the apartment. And in the pitch black, something moved. Ethan scrambled for the lamp. His fingers fumbled over the switch. Click. The bulb exploded. Glass rained down, and a wave of icy air rolled over him, thick as a presence. And then. A voice. Right next to his ear. Look behind you. Ethan froze. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. The room was too quiet. The silence pressed in, thick, suffocating. And then. The closet door creaked open. A breath of pure darkness spilled into the room. Something stepped out. Ethan wanted to run. Wanted to scream. But he did neither. Because in that moment, he realized something. He was already paralyzed. A soft dragging noise filled the silence. Like fingernails gliding along the floor. Closer. Closer. A low, inhuman chuckle filled the air. And then. The bed shifted. The weight of something climbing onto the mattress. Ethan's body screamed at him to move. But he couldn't. His limbs were numb. His breath was locked in his chest. And then. A cold hand gripped his ankle. It was wet. Rotten. The fingers dug into his skin, pulling. Ethan tried to scream. He couldn't. A whisper slid into his ear, gentle, almost loving. Let me in. Ethan's body jerked violently. And just like that. The power came back. The lights blazed to life. The weight on the bed vanished. The room was empty. Ethan sat up, gasping, his heart slamming against his ribs. His eyes darted around. The closet. Open. The floor. Empty. For a split second, he thought, maybe it was a dream. Maybe none of it was real. And then. He saw his ankle. Dark, bruised fingerprints wrapped around the skin. His stomach turned. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. He turned on the camera. But when he flipped to the front-facing screen, his reflection wasn't alone. A tall, faceless figure stood directly behind him. And it was smiling. The screen glitched. And in the distortion, the reflection blinked. Ethan dropped the phone. And then. See you soon. Ethan didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat had locked up, his lungs refusing to work as he stared at the phone lying on the floor. The screen was dark now, but he had seen it, the reflection wasn't his anymore. There had been something else in the mirror. Something that blinked. Something that smiled. The air in the room felt wrong. Heavy. Dense. Like something was still watching. Waiting. Ethan's whole body trembled as he grabbed the phone with a shaking hand. His fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating. He didn't want to turn it back on. He didn't want to see it again. But then. Knock. 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 His heart stopped. The sound came from his bedroom door. The one he had locked. His apartment was small. The only way in or out was through the front door, and he had bolted that shut hours ago. There was no one else here. And yet. Knock. 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 Ethan's breath came in short, shallow bursts. His mind screamed at him to stay still, to be quiet. Maybe if he ignored it, it would go away. Then. The doorknob turned. Ethan bolted out of bed. He grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and held it like a weapon. His knuckles turned white around the base. The knob rattled again. Harder this time. Like someone on the other side was pushing against it. And then. Silence. A stillness so deep it made his skin crawl. The air pressed against his chest. His ears strained for any sound, a breath, a shuffle, anything. Nothing. Ethan didn't move. And then, slowly. The door unlocked. The soft, metallic click sent a bolt of ice down his spine. It had unlocked on its own. His fingers tightened around the lamp. His whole body screamed, "Don't open it." But his legs moved anyway. Step by step. His breath was shallow. His pulse pounded in his skull. He reached for the doorknob. And twisted it. The door swung open. The hallway outside was dark. Too dark. Like the light had been sucked away. The shadows at the end of the hallway were thicker than they should have been. A swirling, moving void. Ethan's stomach twisted. He felt it. Something was standing in the dark. Watching. Waiting. His fingers trembled on the doorknob. His instincts screamed at him to slam the door shut. But then. A whisper. "Come closer." The voice wasn't human. It was deep. Twisted. 1,000 voices layered on top of each other. And worst of all. It was familiar. His own voice was mixed in. Ethan's entire body went cold. He took a step back. The shadows in the hallway twitched. And then. Something moved. A tall, bony figure unfolded from the darkness. Its limbs were too long, too thin. Its head tilted unnaturally. It didn't walk. It glided. Straight for him. Ethan slammed the door. Locked it. Fell back onto the bed, panting. His mind raced. His skin was clammy, ice-cold. And then. He heard it. Not from the hallway. Not from outside. From inside the room. The whisper. Right. Behind. Him. You can't hide. Ethan turned. And the lights went out. Ethan woke up on the floor. His head throbbed. His limbs felt weak. For a moment, he thought he had passed out. But then he realized, he wasn't in his bedroom anymore. He was lying on cold tile. The air smelled stale. Damp. He sat up too fast, his vision spinning. And that's when he saw it. He was in his bathroom. The mirror loomed above the sink, its surface too dark. His heart pounded. He didn't remember coming in here. He didn't remember moving at all. And then. His phone buzzed. Ethan looked down. The screen was on. It had started recording again. His hands shook as he pressed play. The footage showed him. Lying in bed. Asleep. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. Then. The closet door opened. A figure stepped out. Tall. Thin. It crawled onto the bed. And then. It leaned down. Whispered something into his ear. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He didn't want to know. But the volume was already up. The whisper was clear. Wake up. The screen glitched. And then. The video cut to black. Ethan stared, his whole body trembling. His reflection loomed in the mirror above him. But something was wrong. The Ethan in the mirror wasn't shaking. Wasn't pale. Wasn't scared. He was smiling. And then, the reflection blinked. The bathroom light flickered. Ethan's stomach dropped. The reflection raised a hand. And knocked. 3 times. From inside the mirror. The knock echoed inside the bathroom. 3 slow taps. Coming from inside the mirror. Ethan's body locked up. He wanted to move. Wanted to run. But he couldn't. His reflection wasn't following his movements anymore. It just stood there, grinning. The smile stretched too wide, too unnatural. The teeth were sharp. Jagged. And then, the reflection tilted its head. A voice crawled out of the glass, low and distorted. "Let me in." Ethan stumbled backward. His breath came in ragged, shallow bursts. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then the mirror rippled. Like water. Like something was pushing against it from the other side. Ethan's stomach twisted. He needed to get out. Now. He turned to run. And the door slammed shut. The lights flickered. The air went ice cold. And then, a hand reached through the mirror. It was his hand. But it wasn't. The skin was wrong. Gray. Too long. Fingers stretched and cracked at the joints. The hand pressed against the sink, pulling the rest of the thing through the glass. Ethan couldn't move. His legs felt like they had turned to stone. His lungs refused to work. The figure climbed out of the mirror, its movements jerky, unnatural. It had his face. But the eyes were black pits. And the smile. Too wide. Too sharp. The thing straightened its back. And laughed. Ethan shook violently. The laugh sounded wrong. Like static mixed with screaming. Then, the thing moved. Fast. Too fast. 1 second it was by the sink. The next. It was right in front of him. Face to face. Its breath was cold. Sour. Rotten. It lifted a hand. And pressed a single, freezing finger to Ethan's forehead. A whisper slid into his ears. "Time's up." The lights exploded. Ethan woke up somewhere else. The air was thick, heavy. The world distorted. He tried to move. But his limbs were paralyzed. His mouth opened to scream, but no sound came out. Then, he saw it. The mirror. He was inside it. The surface rippled, reflecting a scene he couldn't control. His bedroom. And him. Standing in the center of the room. No. Not him. The thing. It turned to the mirror. Tilted its head. And smiled. It lifted a hand. And waved. Ethan tried to scream. But the mirror sealed shut. The last thing he saw was the thing walking away. Into his life. And leaving him trapped forever. Ethan was trapped. Sealed inside the mirror. He pounded against the glass, but no sound came out. His voice was gone. His reflection was no longer his own. The thing, the imposter, had stolen his life. Ethan watched in horror as it moved through his apartment, wearing his face, his body, his skin. And worst of all, no one could tell the difference. Days passed. Ethan screamed until his throat felt raw. No one heard him. The mirror was a prison, a cold, silent void. He watched helplessly as the thing took over his life. It ate his food. Answered his phone. Smiled at strangers. Even went to work. But something was wrong. It was too perfect. The way it moved. The way it spoke. Every word, every step, too calculated. People noticed. They started pulling away. Avoiding him. And then. They started disappearing. Ethan watched in horror as his best friend, Mark, knocked on the door. The imposter answered. Smiled. Invited him inside. Ethan banged on the mirror. Don't go in. Mark didn't hear. He stepped inside. And then. The door closed. Ethan waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. But Mark never came out. That night, Ethan saw something new in the mirror. A second figure. Standing just behind him. Mark's face. But his eyes were hollow. Empty. His mouth opened, and no sound came out. Just like Ethan. Another prisoner. Another soul stolen. Ethan backed away. His stomach twisted. He wasn't alone in here. The mirror was full of them. Hundreds. Thousands. All trapped. All screaming silently. And the imposter. It was still hungry. More people disappeared. Neighbors. Co-workers. A missing poster went up in the apartment lobby. Then another. And another. Ethan watched, helpless, as the imposter kept smiling. Kept living. Kept feeding. The world had no idea. No one knew the truth. No one. Except her. One night, Ethan's sister, Lily, knocked on the door. The imposter answered. Smiled. Invited her in. Ethan froze. His fist slammed against the glass. No. Lily hesitated. Something in her eyes flickered. Doubt. Fear. She stepped back. The imposter tilted its head. And then. It glitched. Just for a second. Like a broken TV screen. Lily's face drained of color. She saw it. She knew. Ethan's heart pounded. He saw her lips move. Who are you? The imposter didn't answer. Just smiled. Stepped closer. Lily turned to run. The door slammed shut. Lights flickered. Ethan pounded against the mirror. Run, Lily. But the imposter was too fast. It grabbed her wrist. Pulled her close. And whispered something in her ear. Something Ethan couldn't hear. Lily's eyes rolled back. Her body went limp. And then. She vanished. Ethan collapsed. His world shattered. Lily was gone. He had lost. The mirror held too many souls now. And soon. There would be more. The imposter turned toward the mirror. Faced Ethan. And for the first time, spoke directly to him. You can scream all you want. It stepped closer. Its smile widened. No one will ever hear you. Ethan shook his head. Tears blurred his vision. The imposter lifted a hand. Pressed its palm against the glass. And whispered. Sleep now. The mirror went black. And Ethan's world ceased to exist. Somewhere, in the real world, a new missing poster appeared. Ethan Carter, missing. No one ever found him. And in his apartment, a mirror stood in the corner. If you listened closely, you could hear the sound of someone screaming. But no one ever heard. And no one ever would. Because Ethan was just another name. Lost to the dark. Forever.
The Cursed Mirror. The mirror arrived in a crate with no return address. When Olivia Keller dragged it into her apartment, a strange chill crept up her spine. It was old, Victorian maybe. The glass was warped, rippling unnaturally under the dim lighting. But the strangest part? the reflection inside seemed off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but when she walked past, she could swear her reflection moved a little too slow, or not at all. A gift or a curse? The mirror had belonged to her great-grandmother, passed down for generations. Her mother always told her never to look into it for too long. But Olivia was a skeptic. Ghost stories were just stories, right? Still, that first night, as she lay in bed, she felt watched. Like the mirror wasn't just reflecting the room, like something was inside, looking out. She told herself it was just her imagination, until the whispering started. A voice from the other side. It was soft at first, a faint, distant murmur like someone speaking behind glass. She sat up, her breath shallow. It was coming from the mirror. Olivia held still, listening. The voice was distorted, wet, like it was underwater, but she heard the words clear as day. "Let me out." Her blood ran cold. The room plunged into silence. The air grew heavy, and then the reflection moved, but Olivia hadn't. The handprint on the glass. Her heart pounded. She leaned forward, gripping the blankets. Her reflection was smiling, but she wasn't. Then slowly, painfully, deliberately, the Olivia in the mirror raised her hand and pressed it against the glass. A dark, wet handprint bloomed on the surface. A handprint from the other side. Olivia's scream caught in her throat, and as she watched in horror, the handprint began to spread. The glass cracked, and the whisper returned. "Let me out." Olivia didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the mirror across the room. Her body was stiff with fear, her breath shallow. That whisper, "Let me out," it still echoed in her ears. And that handprint, it had been real, hadn't it? The logical part of her brain screamed that it was just her imagination, but deep down she knew something was inside that mirror, and it was watching her. A fracture in reality. The next morning, Olivia tried to shake off the fear. It was just a dream, a trick of the light. But when she approached the mirror, the crack was still there, thin, jagged, like a fracture in reality itself. She reached out, fingertips hovering over the glass. A deep, aching cold radiated from it, seeping into her skin. She jerked her hand back, and that's when she saw it. A shadow. It moved just beneath the surface, something lurking inside. It slithered, twisting, shifting, and then her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. Her heart slammed against her ribs, and before she could react, the shadow lunged forward. Something reaches through the glass, bulged outward, warping as if something was pressing from the other side. A shape. No, a hand. Its twisted fingers stretched toward her, the surface of the mirror rippling like water. Olivia stumbled backward, a scream caught in her throat. The hand disappeared. The mirror went still. The room was silent, but something had changed. She felt it in the air, in her bones. Something had gotten through. The stench of decay. That night, the apartment felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, and the smell, rot, like something had died inside the walls. Olivia gagged, covering her nose. She checked the kitchen, the garbage, even under her bed. Nothing. The smell clung to her skin, to the air, to the mirror. Her stomach churned, because she knew somehow the stench was coming from inside the glass. Like whatever was trapped in there was rotting. Or worse, coming through, the reflection that wasn't hers. She tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself she was just paranoid, but then she saw her reflection move. It didn't copy her. It lagged, a second too slow. Her stomach twisted into knots. She waved her hand. The reflection stood still. Her blood turned to ice. Then, it smiled. It knows she sees it. Not a normal smile, a grin, wide, unnatural, stretched too far, and the eyes, dark, hollow, too deep. Like there was something else looking out from inside her face. Olivia's breath hitched, her hands trembled, and then the reflection spoke, but her lips never moved. It tilted its head, whispering, "Let me in." The light flickered, the room plunged into darkness, and from inside the mirror, something laughed. The room was pitch black, the air was thick, suffocating. Olivia's pulse thundered in her ears. That laughter, deep, wet, crawling through her skin. It came from the mirror, but she couldn't see it anymore. The apartment lights had flickered out. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling. She turned on the flashlight, casting a beam across the room, and froze. The mirror was empty. Her reflection was gone. The missing reflection. She took a step closer, her breath ragged. The glass was deep black, absorbing all light. But something was wrong. She felt it. A shift in the air, like she wasn't alone. And then her reflection came back, but it wasn't her. Not anymore. The Olivia in the mirror stood too straight, too still. Her eyes were wrong, dark, sunken pits, and that grin, too wide, too hungry. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you?" The reflection tilted its head, and then it answered, "I am you now." Something is taking over. A cold wave of terror crashed through her. This thing, it wasn't just mimicking her, it was replacing her. She stumbled back, her breath ragged. The reflection didn't move, it just stared, grinning. Then slowly, its lips parted, and something crawled out. A dark, twisted hand. Not made of flesh, but of shadow. Its fingers stretched past the glass, curling toward her. Reaching. Olivia screamed, and then, the light snapped back on. The hand vanished. The mirror was normal again. Her reflection was her own, but on the glass, written in a smear of black, almost there. It follows. Her Olivia left the apartment, ran down the cold, empty streets, heart hammering. She needed air, space, a way to clear her head. But the feeling didn't leave her. She still felt watched, even outside, like the mirror's presence clung to her skin, like it had left something inside her. She caught her reflection in a store window, and her stomach dropped. It was smiling again. And she wasn't. The stranger in the glass. She rushed home, slamming the door behind her. She couldn't escape it. Not in windows, not in puddles on the sidewalk, and definitely not in the mirror. That night, she covered the mirror with a blanket. But it didn't matter, because she could still hear it, whispering, laughing, soon. Something is coming through. As she lay in bed, she felt something shift in the room. A weight, a presence. She turned over and froze. The blanket had fallen away. The mirror was wide open. The crack in the glass had spread, and inside, something was crawling out. Not her reflection, not anymore. Something much worse. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. The mirror stood bare, its glass now split and warped, like a wound torn open in reality. And from that wound, something crawled out. Olivia's body was paralyzed with terror. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything. But she couldn't. Her legs wouldn't move. Her breath hitched in her throat. Because the thing that wore her face was stepping into her world. The hollow reflection. It wasn't just a shadow, not anymore. It had flesh now, blackened, twisted. Like it had been burned in some otherworldly fire. Its eyes were hollow pits, endless and dark. Its teeth were jagged, unnatural. And yet, it still looked like her, a mockery of her. Like a reflection that had been corrupted. A version of her that had rotted away in the mirror. And now it was here. I don't need the mirror anymore. It stepped forward. The floor creaked beneath its weight. It grinned, wide, unnatural, too knowing. I don't need the mirror anymore, it whispered. Olivia's breath came in shallow gasps. What are you? The thing laughed, a deep, guttural sound that rattled the air. I am what you left behind. It took another step. I am you. The you that never escaped. Olivia backed away. Her pulse pounded against her skull. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But the thing was real. It was here. And it wanted to replace her. The first attack. The lights flickered. The air grew colder, and then, the thing lunged. Its hands snapped forward, its fingers like claws. Olivia screamed, barely dodging. She stumbled back, crashing into her nightstand. The lamp shattered against the floor. The thing's fingers grazed her arm, and an icy pain shot through her veins, like rotting ice, seeping into her flesh. She gasped, clutching her arm. The skin where it touched was blackened, burned. The thing smiled wider. You can't stop it, it whispered. You let me out, and now, it tilted its head. I will take your place. A desperate escape. Olivia ran, bolted for the door, but the moment she grabbed the handle, her body froze. A force unseen, crushing, slammed her against the wall. She gasped for air. The thing stalked closer. You don't get to leave, it whispered. Not this time. Her vision blurred. Her body felt like it was sinking, like she was being pulled backward. No, not pulled. Dragged. The mirror's surface rippled behind her, like a mouth opening. A black void, waiting, and she was being sucked in. The other side. The force grew stronger. Her feet lifted off the ground. The room warped around her. The mirror's crack widened, splitting reality apart. The thing watched her, smiling. It wasn't stopping this, it was making it happen. Because it wasn't leaving empty-handed, it was trading places. Olivia's fingers clawed at the floor. Her screams ripped through the air, but the force was unstoppable. The mirror swallowed her whole, and the world snapped shut. Something else wears her skin. The apartment went silent. The mirror was whole again. no cracks, no shadow, just a simple, ordinary mirror. And standing in front of it was Olivia, or at least something that looked like her. It stared at its new reflection, it blinked, it smiled, much better, and then it turned off the lights. Olivia's scream was swallowed by silence. Her body hit the ground, but not her bedroom floor. She was somewhere else, somewhere wrong. The air was thick, suffocating, heavy with shadows, and the only light was the mirror, floating in the endless black. And on the other side, the thing wearing her face. It looked at her, grinning. Much better. Then it turned off the lights. The world inside the mirror. Olivia scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. The ground beneath her was cold. Not wood, not carpet, something wet, like rotting stone. She looked around, but there was nothing, only blackness. A world without walls. A world where light didn't belong. And then, she heard it. A whisper. Right behind her. She won't let you go. Olivia spun, but there was nothing. No shapes, no figures, just whispers, circling her. She won't let you go. She waits for you. She has always waited for you. A new terror slithered through Olivia's veins. The thing that took her place, it wasn't the only thing here. Something else was watching. Something older, something worse, and it was waiting for her. The whispering hands. A chill crept down her spine. The whispers grew louder. And then, fingers, thin, skeletal, clawing out of the darkness. They wrapped around her arms, her legs, her throat. She screamed, thrashing, but the hands were too strong. They pulled her deeper, away from the mirror, away from the only exit. No, she couldn't let it take her. She fought back, kicked, clawed. Her nails ripped through rotting skin. The hands screamed, but they didn't let go. They pulled harder, dragging her into the darkness. The voice in the dark. Then everything stopped. The hands vanished, the whispers faded, and a new voice spoke. You are mine now. It came from everywhere and from nowhere. A deep, broken voice crawling through her bones. Olivia turned, and there a shape emerged. A figure in black, shifting like smoke. But its face, it was hers, a third version of herself. But this one was rotting. Its skin peeled away in sheets, its eyes wept black. And when it smiled, its teeth were shattered glass. You belong here. It lunged. The final escape. Olivia dodged barely. The thing screeched. The ground cracked beneath her. The mirror, it was still there. Still glowing, still open. Her only way out. She ran, faster than she ever had. The thing chased her, its hands stretched too long, too wrong, fingers like knives. Olivia leaped and slammed into the glass. For a moment, nothing. Then, light exploded. The mirror shattered. The world collapsed. Back to reality? Olivia gasped and bolted upright. She was back in her bedroom. The mirror was gone, not broken, not cracked, just gone. Like it had never been there. Had she escaped, or had she just traded places again? Her breath slowed, her heart pounded. Then she heard it, a whisper. From the window, she turned, and in the reflection of the glass, something smiled back. The Devil's Hospital. The hospital had been abandoned for 30 years. St. Dymphna's Asylum stood at the edge of town like a rotting corpse, its broken windows staring like hollow eye sockets. Once a place for the mentally ill, the asylum had closed down after a horrific scandal. Patients disappeared. Doctors went mad. Something evil was inside those walls, and the town decided to seal it away forever. But urban explorers never listened. Danny, Lisa, and Mark had been waiting for this moment. They had spent years documenting haunted places, chasing real horror, but nothing had ever been truly terrifying. Every asylum, every old hospital, it was all just graffiti and dust. But St. Dymphna's? People never came back. The last group to enter had gone missing for 2 weeks. When they finally emerged, their bodies were found hanging from the hospital's gates, skin removed, eyes gouged out, mouths frozen in silent screams. Danny didn't believe in ghosts, but he did believe in a good story. Tonight, they would finally enter the Devil's Hospital, and they would never leave. Crossing the threshold, the front doors loomed like the gaping maw of some ancient beast. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the hospital itself was breathing. Lisa shivered. I don't like this place, she muttered. That's the point, Mark said, adjusting his camera. Danny grinned. Come on, guys, we finally made it. They stepped inside, and the doors slammed shut behind them. Inside the nightmare, the air changed the second they entered. It was dead. No sound, no echo, just an endless, crushing silence. Lisa clicked on her flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing peeling walls covered in something black and wet. Danny ran his fingers across the wall. Mold? He guessed. Lisa shook her head. That's not mold. It looked like veins. Mark aimed his camera down the hallway. The lens glitched. Something's messing with my camera, he muttered. Then, a sound, a whisper, so soft, so distant, like something deep inside the hospital had just woken up. Danny grinned. Did you hear that? Lisa nodded slowly. Yeah, and I don't think we should be here. Danny ignored her. Let's go deeper. They walked down the hallway, their footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence. The shadows twisted, the walls breathed. Something was watching, and it was hungry. The patient rooms. The hospital rooms were filled with rusted beds, shattered mirrors, and old, yellowed restraints. Lisa stopped at one of the doors. There was something scratched into the wood. Don't look at him. Who's him? Mark whispered. Danny pushed the door open. Inside was an old patient's room. A wheelchair sat in the middle, and in the corner of the room, a man stood facing the wall. Lisa froze. Who the hell is that? Danny lifted his camera. Sir? He called. The man didn't move. Lisa grabbed Danny's arm. We need to leave, right now. Danny took a step closer. The man's head twitched. Then, he snapped his neck completely backward. His face was not human. Mouth stretched too wide, skin peeling, eyes gone. And he was smiling. Lisa screamed. The lights flickered. Danny stumbled back. The man moved toward them, fast. But the moment the light went out completely, he vanished, the hallway of the dead. They ran. Mark gasped for breath, his camera shaking. What the hell was that? Danny couldn't answer. Lisa grabbed his arm. We have to get out of here. They turned a corner and froze. The hallway had changed. The walls were no longer rotting and broken. They were clean, bright. But they were not alone. The hallway was full of patients. They stood motionless, heads twitching. Their eyes were missing. Their mouths stretched into silent screams. Danny's blood turned to ice. The patients turned toward them, and they started to run. Lisa grabbed Danny's hand. Move! They sprinted down the hallway, the sound of bare feet slapping against the tile chasing after them. The hospital was alive, and it wanted to keep them. The blood room. Danny slammed into a door at the end of the hallway. He threw it open and froze. The room was covered in blood. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, dripping, soaking, drenched in red. And in the middle, a surgeon stood over a patient, cutting into them. The patient was still alive, twitching. Mouth open in agony, the surgeon turned. His eyes were pure black. His mask was soaked in blood, and he lifted his scalpel. You're next. The lights went out, and the screaming began. The moment the lights died, the screaming began. Danny couldn't see anything. Just the wet sound of flesh being cut, the desperate gasps of the patient, and the chilling whispers that slithered through the dark. Then, a click. The lights flickered back on. The blood-soaked surgeon was gone. The operating table was empty. But the walls, they were now covered in words, scratched deep into the flesh of the building itself. No one leaves. He sees you. Your soul belongs to him. Lisa grabbed Danny's arm, her nails digging into his skin. Where's Mark? She cried. Danny turned. Mark was gone. The red footprints Danny's breath caught in his throat. Mark had been right behind them. There was nowhere he could have gone. Lisa spun around. Mark, she screamed. No answer. But on the floor, leading down the dark hallway, footprints. Not just any footprints. Bare feet. Bloody. Leading away, deeper into the hospital. Lisa looked at Danny. We're not following that. Danny clenched his fists. We have to. Lisa grabbed his arm. This place isn't normal, Danny. People don't just disappear like that. We need to leave before we... A loud thump echoed through the hallway. Then another, and another. Like something massive was dragging itself toward them. Danny grabbed Lisa's wrist. Run! They bolted. The moving walls. As they ran, the hallways changed. The walls shifted, stretched, pulsed, like veins filled with thick black blood. Doors appeared where they shouldn't be. Corridors twisted, turning back on themselves. Danny's lungs burned, but he didn't stop. Mark, he shouted, and then a scream. Mark's scream. It came from behind a door labeled Ward 6 Restricted. Lisa stopped. We are not going in there. Danny grabbed the handle. Mark's in there. Lisa hesitated, then nodded. Danny pushed the door open, and everything changed. The dead patients. The room was huge. Rows of hospital beds lined the walls, and in each bed, a patient. Their faces were wrapped in bandages, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways, and they were all breathing. a slow, wet, rasping sound. Lisa stepped back. "They're alive?" Danny shook his head. "I don't think so." Then one of them moved. It sat up slowly, head twitching, then another, and another, until all of them were staring at Danny and Lisa. Danny's blood turned to ice. Lisa whimpered, and then one of them spoke, but it wasn't a voice, it was Mark's voice. "Help me." Danny's heart pounded. "Mark, where are you?" The patient stood up. Lisa grabbed Danny's hand. "We need to leave, now." One of the patients twitched violently. Its bandages unraveled, revealing a jaw unhinged too wide, and a hole where its eyes should have been. It screamed. The lights flickered violently, and suddenly, every patient rushed toward them. Lisa screamed. Danny grabbed her and ran. The patients chased them, their feet slapping against the floor, mouths gape high, in silent agony. The walls melted, the ceiling dripped blood. Something was laughing, a deep, guttural laugh. And then Danny saw it. A door at the end of the hall. He yanked Lisa inside and slammed it shut. The elevator of shadows. They were trapped. The room was small, cold, metal. An elevator. Lisa was shaking. "Danny, what is this place?" Danny had no idea. But then the elevator moved by itself. Lisa whimpered. The buttons had no numbers, just one word. Hell. Danny's breath caught. The light flickered, and then a face appeared in the reflection of the metal doors. Not his face, not Lisa's, but Mark's. His eyes were hollow, his mouth twisted in agony, and he whispered, "It's too late." The lights went out, and the screaming began again. The elevator shook violently. Danny pressed himself against the wall, gripping Lisa's hand so hard his fingers felt like they might snap. Mark's hollow-eyed face remained in the reflective metal doors. His lips twisted, whispering over and over, "It's too late, it's too late, it's too late." Lisa started sobbing. The elevator lurched. The floor display flickered. The buttons were gone, except for one word, hell. Then, with a loud ding, the doors slid open, and they stepped out into a nightmare. The morgue of the forgotten. The room beyond the elevator was freezing. Rows of metal slabs stretched out in front of them, each covered with a white sheet. The air smelled like rot. Lisa stopped breathing. "Danny, we shouldn't be here." Danny's breath came out in a cloud. The walls were lined with body drawers. Each one had names scratched off. No identity. Just forgotten bodies, locked away in the Devil's Hospital. Then, a hand twitched under one of the sheets. Lisa gasped. Danny froze. The sheet slid off. A corpse sat up. Its mouth was sewn shut. Its fingertips were raw, bleeding, scratched down to the bone, and in the silence, a whisper filled the air. "Let me out." Lisa backed away. "Danny, we need to go. Now." But the body drawers started rattling. One by one, they slammed open, and the dead began to crawl out. Danny grabbed Lisa's hand. They sprinted down the freezing hallway as the corpses dragged themselves after them. The hospital's lights flickered wildly, and then, a sound. A scream. Not just any scream, Mark's scream. Lisa stopped in her tracks. "That's him!" Danny looked ahead. A door labeled operating room. The scream came from inside. Danny didn't hesitate. He threw the door open and stepped into hell. The surgeons returned. Mark was strapped to a gurney. His mouth was stitched shut. His chest was cut open, ribs spread apart, organs still pulsing, but he was alive. His eyes locked onto Danny, begging and standing over him. The surgeon. The same blood-soaked figure from before. Only now, Danny could see his face, or rather, his lack of a face. Where his eyes should have been were gaping holes, leaking black fluid. His smile stretched unnaturally wide, sewn in place, and in his hand, a rusted scalpel, dripping with fresh blood. Lisa gagged. The surgeon turned toward them. His voice was low, broken, hungry. "Ah, more patients." Danny grabbed a rusted chair and swung it at the surgeon's head. The impact sent the monster stumbling back. Danny ripped the restraints off Mark. "We're getting out of here." But Mark was crying, shaking his head, trying to speak through his stitched lips. Danny pulled him up. "Come on!" Lisa was already at the door. But then, the operating lights exploded, and the room plunged into darkness. The crawling flesh. The walls pulsed. A wet, slithering noise filled the air. Lisa screamed. The lights flickered back on, and something was crawling out of Mark's open chest. Something wrong. A long, blackened hand, covered in stitches, reached out from inside his body. Fingernails curled like claws. The surgeon laughed. "He belongs to us now." Mark's body convulsed violently. His stomach bulged, something moving inside. Danny yanked Lisa toward the door. "Run!" Lisa sprinted first. Danny followed. but Mark's hand shot out, grabbing his ankle. Mark's eyes were black now. Tears of blood streamed down his face. "Don't let them take me," he begged through the stitches. Danny hesitated, just for a second, and in that second, Mark was ripped away, dragged back onto the gurney. Danny screamed his name, but the surgeon's scalpel came down and Mark stopped moving. Forever. The escape that wasn't. Danny didn't remember running, didn't remember Lisa screaming. The next thing he knew, they were back at the elevator. Danny's hands shook violently. Lisa hit the button. Come on," she sobbed. The elevator door slid open, but this time, there was no reflection, no inside, just a black void. Lisa froze. Danny felt his stomach drop. What the hell is this? And then, a hand reached out, a charred skeletal hand. It grabbed Lisa's wrist. She screamed. Danny pulled her back, but the hand was stronger. It yanked her into the darkness. Danny reached out, but Lisa was gone, swallowed by the void, and then, the elevator door slammed shut. Danny was alone, and behind him, a voice whispered, "Your turn." The lights went out. The moment the lights went out, Danny felt it. Breathing. Not his own. Something else. Deep, wet, hollow. It was right behind him. Danny's chest tightened. He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, and then a hand slid over his shoulder. Cold, bony, too many fingers. A voice slithered into his ear. "You should not be here." The lights exploded back on. Danny spun and saw nothing, only the empty, rotting hallway. But the walls were moving, like something was inside them. Something big, and it was watching him. The blood-stained hall. Danny stumbled backward. The floor wasn't solid anymore. It was pulsing, throbbing, like the hospital itself was alive. Down the hall, the lights flickered wildly. Lisa was gone, Mark was dead, and Danny was alone. He looked ahead. One door stood open. A flickering sign above it read, "Exit." Danny's breath caught. Could it really be that easy? He didn't care. He ran for it. But the moment he stepped inside, the walls slammed shut behind him. The operating theater. Danny turned in a panic. He was in a massive circular room. A surgical theater. Rows of empty seats stretched above him, all facing the center. The operating table was covered in blood, and on the floor, a scalpel, still wet. Danny took a shaky step forward, and then the lights above the seats clicked on. The theater was not empty. Danny's stomach dropped. Every seat was filled. Rows and rows of people in blood-stained surgical gowns. Their faces were missing, nothing but stretched, empty skin, and in unison, they all turned their heads to look at him. The black surgeon. Danny's breath caught. The figures didn't move, just watched. A speaker above the operating table crackled to life. A deep, broken voice whispered, "Begin the procedure." The door across the room creaked open, and the surgeon stepped inside. His scalpel dripped with black liquid. His stitched-up grin was too wide. Danny backed away. No. The surgeon took a slow step forward. "You are sick, Mr. Calloway. The disease has spread." Danny's chest tightened. "What the hell are you talking about?" The surgeon tilted his head. The figures in the seats began to hum, a slow, horrible melody. The walls shuddered. The operating table shook. The scalpel on the floor twitched, then flew across the room, landing in Danny's hand. "You must be cured," the surgeon whispered, and then the operating table tore open. Something crawled out, the thing that wore Danny's face. Danny's breath stopped. The thing was humanoid but not right. Its skin was raw, wet, stretched over a too thin frame. Its fingers were long, sharp, its eyes were Danny's. Its face was his. A perfect copy, but twisted, wrong, smiling. The surgeon spread his arms wide. "The operation is complete." Danny shook his head violently. "No!" The thing took a step toward him. It spoke. "Why are you running?" Its voice was his voice. Danny stumbled back. "Stay the hell away from me." The thing's grin stretched wider. "But I am you." The audience in the seats stood up. Their skin-stretched faces split open, and they screamed. The lights shattered. The room plunged into darkness. Danny felt hands grab him. Hundreds of them, clawing, pulling, dragging him into the void. The last thing he saw was his own face grinning back at him. And then, everything was gone. Danny's mind snapped back into place like a trap springing shut. Darkness. Cold. Absolute darkness. But he wasn't alone. There were whispers all around him, soft, insidious. A chorus of voices chanting in unison, "Cut it out, cut it out, cut it out." Danny's chest tightened. His breath came in ragged gasps. He couldn't see, couldn't tell if he was standing, lying down, floating. Then, a sudden, blinding light. Danny squeezed his eyes shut. The overwhelming stench of antiseptic flooded his nose. When he forced his eyes open, he was somewhere new. Somewhere impossible. The hospital without end. He was in a hallway. Not just any hallway. The same hallway. Over and over again. Danny turned his head. The same exit sign, the same elevator, the same nurse's station, empty and abandoned. He ran down the corridor, but when he turned the corner, he was back where he started. No, 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 he muttered, his voice cracking. He punched the wall. It felt soft, too soft, like flesh. The walls shuddered beneath his hand, and then the lights flickered. The whispers grew louder. Cut it out, cut it out, cut it out. And then, Danny heard it, a scream, a woman's voice. Lisa. He spun around. The doors at the end of the hallway burst open, and something was coming. Lisa's fate. Danny's blood ran cold. Lisa stumbled into the hall. Her clothes were ripped. Her eyes were wild, unfocused. Her skin was covered in stitches. Long, crude black sutures, as if she had been sewn together like a rag doll. Danny's stomach turned. Lisa, he ran toward her. She staggered, shaking her head violently. Danny, no, get away. Tears streaked her filthy, blood-stained face. He's coming, she screamed, and then the lights exploded, and the surgeon stepped into the hallway. Down. The final procedure begins. He was taller now, or maybe Danny was just smaller. His scalpel glistened, wet and slick. His stitched mouth curled into a cruel grin. You are unwell, Mr. Calloway. Danny grabbed Lisa, pulling her behind him. Stay the hell away from us. The surgeon's head twitched unnaturally. He raised his scalpel. The infection must be removed. Danny felt something move under his skin, like worms crawling beneath the flesh. His veins turned black. Lisa screamed. Danny collapsed. A pain like hot needles tore through his body. He lifted his shaking hands. The skin was peeling away, falling in strips, and underneath there was nothing. Nothing but the hospital. His flesh was part of it, his bones belonged to it, his soul was feeding it. The surgeon's voice was pure delight. The operation is complete. Danny screamed. The truth of the hospital. Lisa's wails filled the air. Danny's mind fractured. He understood now. The Devil's Hospital wasn't real, not in the way the living understood reality. It was a place where the lost were trapped, a place where the dead weren't dead, a place where the sick were never cured, only consumed. Danny had been dying since the moment he arrived, and now he was part of it. His flesh peeled away completely, his bones cracked open, his veins unraveled like string. Danny Calloway ceased to be, and something else stood in his place. The final horror. Lisa collapsed to the floor. She stared up at Danny, or what was left of him. His face was stitched, his eyes were empty black pits, his mouth twisted into a familiar, awful grin. The surgeon turned to Lisa. You're next, Lisa screamed. The lights died, the walls shuddered, and then, silence.
Don't look at the door. Alex had always been skeptical of the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, and urban legends were nothing more than stories to him, until the night he first heard the tapping. It was a little after 3 a.m. when he woke up to the sound. Tap. 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 His bedroom door was shut, as it always was before he went to bed. He stared at it from the safety of his blanket, waiting. Silence. Maybe he had imagined it. Shaking his head, he rolled over and closed his eyes again. Tap. 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 A chill crawled up his spine. He sat up, his heart starting to race. The apartment was silent except for the faint humming of the refrigerator in the kitchen. His roommate, Matt, was out of town, and no one else had a key. It had to be the wind, he reasoned. Or maybe the neighbors. But something about the sound unsettled him. It wasn't random. It was too rhythmic. Too deliberate. Alex cleared his throat. Hello. Silence. Swallowing the growing unease, he lay back down, pulling the blanket up to his chin. The moment his eyes shut. Tap. 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 A surge of cold fear wrapped around his chest. This time, he didn't move. He didn't answer. Instead, he closed his eyes tightly and waited for morning. The next day, Alex tried to forget about it. It was easy to brush off, until night came. Dread settled deep in his stomach as he climbed into bed, his eyes flicking toward the door more often than he cared to admit. The apartment was silent. Too silent. He forced himself to relax. It was just paranoia. His mind playing tricks on him. Then. Tap. 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 Alex's breath hitched. It was the exact same pattern as the night before. Then came the scratching. At first, it was soft, like a fingernail barely dragging across wood. But then it grew stronger, deeper, more insistent, as if someone was running razor-sharp nails down the door. His stomach twisted into knots. Then came the worst part. The doorknob turned. It didn't rattle. It didn't shake violently. It turned slowly, as if whatever was on the other side knew he was watching. Alex shot up in bed, his pulse pounding in his ears. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. He wanted to check. He wanted to get up and throw open the door to prove to himself that nothing was there. But something inside him whispered, "Don't." And somehow, he knew. If he opened that door, he wouldn't be alone. Alex didn't sleep. By morning, he was exhausted, but he still refused to acknowledge what was happening. Sleep deprivation. Stress. That's all it was. That night, he shoved a chair under the doorknob. It made him feel safer, if only slightly. By 3 a.m., he was still awake. Then the whispers began. At first, they were faint. Just the sound of air moving through the room. But then he heard it. "Don't look at the door." A chill ran through his entire body. He squeezed his eyes shut, pulling the blanket over his head. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembling. "If you look, it will see you." The voice was right beside him. Alex could feel something standing next to his bed. His body screamed at him to move, to run, but he was paralyzed with fear. And then, in the deafening silence, the voice spoke one last time. "It knows you can hear it." The moment the first sliver of sunlight crept through the blinds, the presence was gone. But the damage was already done. It knew. Alex's mind was unraveling. He avoided his bedroom during the day, but no matter where he went, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He considered staying at a friend's place, but some part of him feared that whatever it was would follow him. That night, he made a decision. He would look. He needed to know what was happening. By 3:12 a.m., the tapping started. Tap. 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 Then the scratching. Scratch. Then the voice. "Look at the door." His heart pounded. Sweat dripped down his forehead. He looked. The door was wide open. And something stood in the doorway. It was tall. Its limbs were too long. Its mouth was stretched into an inhuman, lipless grin. But its eyes, black, hollow voids, were the worst part. They locked onto his. Then, it moved. Alex didn't remember screaming. He didn't remember running. The next thing he knew, he was outside, standing barefoot in the freezing night air, staring up at his apartment window. His bedroom light was still on. And in the window, it stood there. Staring down at him. Grinning. He never went back inside. It didn't matter. Because now, it followed him. No matter where he went, at exactly 3:12 a.m., he would hear it. Tap. 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 And the whisper would always follow. Look at the door. No matter how hard he tried, he could never sleep again. Because the moment he closed his eyes, it would be waiting. Sleep paralysis demon. Jason had always been a deep sleeper. But lately, his nights had turned into something else, something horrifying. It started subtly. He'd wake up at odd hours, drenched in sweat, with a sinking feeling that something was watching him. At first, there was nothing but the suffocating silence of his dark bedroom. The faint hum of his ceiling fan. The distant sound of cars outside. Nothing unusual. Then came the paralysis. The first time it happened, Jason woke up in the middle of the night, eyes wide open, heart hammering in his chest. He could feel his body, but he couldn't move. His arms, legs, even his fingers refused to obey. A heavy weight pressed down on his chest, as if something unseen was holding him down. Panic set in. He wanted to scream, to cry out, but his mouth wouldn't move. His breathing grew ragged as his eyes darted around the room, searching for anything, any sign that this was just a dream. That's when he saw it. A shape in the farthest corner of the room. Something crouched low, just beyond the reach of the moonlight. It was humanoid, but grotesquely thin, its limbs too long, its face obscured in shadow. It was watching him. Jason's mind screamed for him to wake up, to move, to do something. But all he could do was stare in horror as the figure crawled closer. The moment it reached the foot of his bed, Jason's body suddenly jolted. He could move again. He gasped, sitting upright, chest heaving. He frantically scanned the room. The figure was gone. For hours, he sat awake, trying to convince himself it was just a hallucination. A trick of his mind. But deep down, he knew. It was real. And it was coming back. The episodes didn't stop. Every night, Jason found himself paralyzed, trapped in his own body, helpless as the shadowy figure returned. And now, it whispered. At first, the voice was barely a breath against his ear, a soundless vibration that scraped against his mind. Let me in. Jason couldn't move. Couldn't speak. His throat was locked, his body frozen in terror. The creature lingered at the foot of his bed, its head tilting unnaturally, as if studying him. The second night, it whispered again. I see you. By the third night, Jason stopped sleeping altogether. His body ached from exhaustion, his eyes burned, but he refused to close them. He couldn't risk facing it again. Then, one night, as he sat in bed, forcing himself to stay awake, something changed. He wasn't paralyzed. But the whisper still came. Don't fight it. Jason's breath hitched. The voice wasn't inside his head anymore. It was coming from the foot of his bed. Slowly, his eyes trailed downward. And this time, the creature wasn't just in his dreams. It was real. Jason's reality began to crumble. At first, he convinced himself it was a hallucination. But as the nights passed, the entity grew bolder. It was no longer confined to his sleep. It was here. In his waking world. Sometimes, Jason saw it in the shadows of his bedroom. Other times, he caught glimpses of it in the reflection of his bathroom mirror, its hollow eyes staring back at him. It was never gone. Then came the touch. Jason woke up one night, heart pounding, a chilling presence beside him. A slow, cold pressure traced along his arm. His breath hitched. It was touching him. He couldn't scream. He couldn't move. He could only feel its skeletal fingers pressing against his skin, its breath against his cheek. Then, for the first time, it laughed. Jason was desperate. He researched sleep paralysis, saged his room, even visited a priest. Nothing worked. The entity was growing stronger. Now, Jason didn't even need to be asleep to see it. He saw it in daylight, in darkened windows, in his own reflection. And then, it hurt him. One morning, he woke up to deep, jagged scratches along his arms and chest. His bed sheets were shredded. His mirror had a single, claw-like streak running across it. That night, he tried to stay awake. But exhaustion won. At 3 a.m., Jason's eyes fluttered open. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The entity was on top of him. Its bony fingers wrapped around his throat. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. It exuded a rancid stench, like rotting flesh. Jason's vision blurred. His lungs screamed for air. Then, the whisper came. Almost mine. Darkness took him. Jason couldn't take it anymore. He packed a bag and fled, checking into a hotel miles away. He locked the doors, left every light on, and finally allowed himself to relax. It was over. Or so he thought. At 3 a.m., he stirred awake. A chill ran through the room. Then, a whisper. Found you. Jason froze. The room's temperature plummeted. The lights flickered. His breath hitched as he realized, he couldn't move. In the mirror across from the bed, he saw it. Standing right behind him. It was no longer a shadow, no longer a whisper. It was here. And this time. It wasn't leaving. The last thing Jason felt was its hands closing around his throat. The last thing he heard was laughter. The shadow under the bed. Daniel had never been afraid of the dark. At 25, he considered himself rational, a man of logic rather than superstition. But ever since moving into his new apartment, strange things had started happening. It began subtly. Objects shifted slightly from where he left them. His phone charger, always plugged in beside his bed, would be coiled up on the floor. The closet door, which he always shut before sleeping, would be slightly ajar in the morning. One night, as he reached under his bed for a fallen book, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A shape, darker than the surrounding shadows, seemed to retreat as his fingers brushed the floor. He yanked his hand back, heart pounding. Was it just a trick of the light? Shaking off his unease, Daniel climbed into bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The feeling of something watching him from the darkness lingered. Over the next few nights, Daniel tried to ignore the unsettling feeling, but it only got worse. He began hearing faint noises, soft, slow scratching against the wooden floor beneath his bed. At first, he convinced himself it was mice or some other pest. But as he leaned over the edge one night, shining his phone's flashlight beneath the bed, he saw only emptiness. The sound stopped instantly. He lay back down, phone still in hand. Seconds later, the scratching resumed. This time, it was closer. Something was down there. His breath caught in his throat as the noise shifted. A slow, deliberate dragging sound, like nails scraping along the wood, moved toward the edge of the bed where he lay. He shot up and flicked on the lamp. Silence. Nothing but the faint hum of his air conditioner. He didn't sleep at all that night. Daniel considered sleeping on the couch, but part of him refused to give in to what he assumed were irrational fears. He even tried moving the bed, thinking maybe the sounds were coming from something underneath the floorboards. But that didn't explain what happened next. Around 2 a.m., as he lay staring at the ceiling, he heard a whisper. At first, he thought it was coming from outside. But as he strained to listen, he realized with stomach-churning certainty, it was coming from under the bed. A slow, raspy voice, barely more than a breath, murmured his name. Daniel. He bolted upright, his pulse hammering. The voice was so quiet, yet so clear. He forced himself to look over the edge of the bed, his whole body tense. He turned on his phone's flashlight and peered beneath. There was nothing there. But the whispering didn't stop. It was coming from somewhere much darker. Somewhere just beyond the reach of the light. Daniel refused to sleep. He sat upright in bed, every light in his apartment turned on. He didn't care how ridiculous it seemed. But exhaustion eventually took its toll. At some point in the early hours of the morning, he drifted off. He woke up to a freezing chill against his arm. His eyes fluttered open, and his breath caught in his throat. A hand, long, thin, and impossibly dark, was gripping his wrist. It was reaching up from under the bed. Daniel let out a strangled cry and yanked his arm away, scrambling to the opposite side of the mattress. He didn't dare move, heart hammering as he watched the space below his bed. Slowly, the hand withdrew into the shadows. And then, something began to emerge. Two hollow, black eyes stared at him from the darkness beneath the bed, its face stretching into an unnatural grin. Daniel didn't think. He leapt from the bed and sprinted out of the room, slamming the door behind him. He spent the rest of the night locked in his bathroom, refusing to come out until daylight. Morning brought no comfort. Daniel barely ate. He barely moved. He debated calling someone, his brother, his friend, anyone who would believe him. But he knew the truth. No one would. By nightfall, he made a decision. He wouldn't sleep in that room anymore. He'd stay on the couch. Maybe even move out. But as he walked past his bedroom to grab some clothes, he made the mistake of glancing inside. The bed. It had moved. It wasn't against the wall anymore. It had been dragged into the center of the room. And underneath, the shadows were deeper than they should be. As Daniel stared, paralyzed in the doorway, something shifted in the darkness beneath the bed. And then, the whisper came again. "Daniel, come back to bed." The door slammed shut on its own. And the lights went out.